Howdy folks, we were looking at Edge Magazine issue 16, released late 1994 but cold January 1995. And we're on to the review section called Test Screen. And we start with the biggie, the Need for Speed, the first one, which looked fantastic. I mean, these videos says they look better than Gran Turismo, which was released almost 4 years later. It played also well, and you had a wide selection of cars, which all drove differently. So this really was the best racing game released at the time. And not that, I mean, you might want to prefer playing Daytona now, because Daytona is totally different than anything else. But at the time, if you wanted a good racing sim, there was no competition for the Need for Speed. It was on 3DO. And Edge gives it an 8 out of 10. Fair enough. I probably would have given it a 9. But yeah. And part 2 wasn't that very good. That was released for the PlayStation 1. But part 3 again was good because you could race the police, which was exciting. Okay, Little Big Adventure, which Edge really loves. And I didn't like it that much because of the really bad controls. And as a story, I mean, without the combat, you basically have a click and carry adventure, and it wasn't the best of those either, to be honest. And it was kind of fun. You could sneak around at times. But no, I wasn't that impressed by the game, to be honest. It wasn't as good as a Zelda game. But I do think Edge is correct in giving the game a 9, though. I would have given it an 8, but still, because it is a good game. There's no doubt about it. You can get it nowadays for the iPad. So try out that version. Better controls. Burn Cycle, the biggest game for the CDI, and this would more or less end their revival in 1994. It gets a 7. It looked pretty well, very interesting imagery. There were silly puzzles, that was mostly the game, but there were some click and carry aspects to the game too, going back and forth, talking to the right people. And the story was nonsensical, you know, usual cyberpunk trash, but if you're into that, you'll love this game, because it's all cyberpunk. And I think it's worth remembering. So it's Burn Cycle for the CDI. Z-Wolf, I don't think was worth remembering, though. Edge gives it an 8 for having good gameplay. Well, yeah, I mean, it's for the Amiga, fit on a floppy, but there are better ways to fly around and shoot things, if you ask me, like playing Defender. Final Fantasy VI. This is one of Edge's worst reviews. I mean, they gave it an 8, but I don't think this will be sharp enough for you to read, but they basically don't say anything about the game. Really nothing. They simply say, yeah, you have random encounters, and yeah, there's a good story, and yeah, RPGs are bigger in Japan than in the West. That's all they say. Nothing about how fantastic the characters are, or how well the game is, the world was developed. Very interesting themes, magic versus technology, and this is the along with Chrono Trigger, this is the Japanese RPG of Japanese RPGs. Square went all out with this game, and yeah, you have to play it. Even if you don't like RPGs, you have to give this game a chance. It has so much going for it. Well, Edge at least gives it an 8. Should have been a 9, maybe even a 10. Oh well. So, Doom being released for the Jaguar. A very handsome conversion by the fingers of John Carmack. It doesn't look better than the PC version, like Wolfenstein 3D does. And I've read that some of the enemies were taken out, like the Cyber Demon. But still, a very good conversion. I don't think there was any music, so that they could use the sound chip for extra graphics. But it played very well. And the PC version is better, but this is still a very nice version. And Edge gives it an 8. Soulstar, the last of the 3 games that Core made for the Sega CD, and probably one of the last games released for the system too. Gets a 7, another 3D shooting game with freedom to move around, but still not much better than Star Fox. And not that much better than Thunderhawk either. People trying to sell 3DOs and Jaguars in England. Off-World Interceptor was a very cute racing game. A lot goes on the screen. You keep tumbling forward and all kinds of stuff happens. It's for a 3DO. It looks very nice. But the gameplay, well, I don't know. Felt like most of the arcade games in the 80s. So it gets a 7. I think that's reasonable. Virtual Racing Deluxe. Well, it gets an 8, right? Yes, for the this time for the 32X, which was better than the Genesis version, mostly because it had 2 extra cars and a better frame rate. Still, don't bother. Star Wars Arcade. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this version didn't look as good as the arcade version because they took out the texture mapping. It still looked pretty. Nevertheless, one of the many pretty looking on-rail shooter of the mid-90s. And this one didn't use 3D technology, but it did do some math work on the polygons. Still only gets a 6. Now, Edge Magazine loves Speedball. It's hard to comprehend. Made by Renegade, made by the Bitmap Brothers. The Bitmap Brothers would be always hailed by Edge Magazine as one of the best programmers in the 80s. One of their biggest hits was Speedball, a quirky sports game, which had violence. But most of all, it was just nice tempo and fast, and just as fun as playing football on the computer. And for some reason, the Bitmap Brothers have amazing respect in England and are seen as cool. Now, what's his name again? The person who, Mark Coleman, that's his name. Mark Coleman, I don't think he's especially cool or anything, but he's treated like a rock star in England. But, check out Speedball 2 for the Amiga. And, maybe you might think it's as good as everybody else in England does. I don't. Although I must admit, Xenon 2, made by the Bitmap Brothers, that sounded awesome at the time. Okay, let's continue. Lots of commercials here. So, World of Amiga has a expo. Get your back issues, Jaguar. Here are the charts. They've shortened the charts. I don't trust them anymore. They do have Mortal Kombat 2 at number 1 and 2 for the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo. But we see a Neo Geo game at 2nd place in Japan. I just don't believe that. Urban Strike tops the UK charts. Well, that could have been possible, but still. Jurassic Park, number 3 for the Super Nintendo. I don't know. And in the arcades at the time, apparently we had Daytona. We had Suzuku, 8 Hours. Revolution X, you saw that before. Virtua Fighter 2, and Outrunners. What's Outrunners? I should look that up. Sounds like a sequel to Outrun. Work for Rare. Lots of companies to work for. Here you have an interview with Sid Meier. Not a very good interview. I'm somewhat disturbed how the interview acts like he's been in the business since the beginning, which is not true. I mean, he started making games in the early 80s, but, I mean, there was a whole business in the 70s already. So, but maybe that's just me. I mean, when people say Chris Crawford was at the start of the industry, even I don't totally agree. I mean, you have to talk to Nolan Bushnell for the true start, and Ralph Baer. But Sid Meier, he's been around, still releasing games. He mentions in this article that he programs all his games, so I don't think he does it anymore. And he talks about how he prefers the PC to the Amiga because it's more powerful. So yeah, some little talk about CD drives and women in games and the 3DO, but nothing really interesting stated by Sid Meier on those cases. So the interview kind of drags on. And, there's a question if there will be Civilization 2, and Sid Meier says no, something else, but of course Civilization 2 was released. And 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I myself am a big fan of Civilization Revolution, which I really hope will one day be released for the PC. I'm not holding my breath though. You can get it for iPad though, and the dual screen. The Q&A, no questions I care to report. So we'll continue on and take a look at next issue. Of course, the PlayStation and the Saturn had been released in Japan. Saturn got a lot of attention this time. Next time will be a bit more PlayStation. And that's 116 pages of Edge number 16 with another interesting graphic. We see LBA's main character reading Edge. Can I get a sharp image, please? I don't think I can. And little fun fact, Edge magazine you can actually find in a video game, namely Grand Theft Auto Vice City, if you look into one of the windows. It's called Ars magazine, or Ars, but it's definitely Edge. And speaking of the magazine and its popularity, so this issue is 116 pages long, getting bigger as we get through time. And Edge would eventually reach peaks of about 200 pages. And those are good times, but it's now August 2017, and recently, not one but 2 issues have been published with only 116 pages. I can tell they try to aim for 132. They've been doing that for the last 4 years or so. But now they occasionally do a mere 160 pages. So I'm afraid the magazine is doing less well than it used to, and I'd hate to see them go back to 100 pages. Yeah. I mean, I'm making this series because I love Edge. I love collecting it. I love following it. And all my other favorite video game magazines, GamePro, Nintendo Power, EGM. I mean, you also have the Gamer Quarterly, but that was a bit alternative. But yeah, I want Edge to stay around. The only other 2 magazines I know that would still exist, at least in English, are Games TM and Games Master. I don't care for Games Master. That's just too kiddie. And Games TM, oh, it's okay. But I like my Edge. Of course, there's also Retro Magazine, which I might have been considering collecting that. They have a lot of in-depth articles on older games. That's a lot of fun. Occasionally I buy it. But yeah, I just want Edge to stay around. But next time we'll discuss Edge Magazine number 17. So I'll see you then.